Some men hunt for the meat, others for the trophy. But for me, the hunt has always been a psychological exercise. It's about the thrill of the chase, the patience of the stalk, and the ultimate satisfaction of taking something that someone else thinks they own. In the fall of last year, I wasn't looking for a friend, even though I spent my nights scrolling through local hunting groups on Facebook. I was looking for a doorway into a life that wasn't mine. I was pre-screening potential buddies with a cold, calculated set of criteria. I wasn't just looking for someone who knew their way around a duck blind. I was looking for a man who was clearly outmatched by his own life. I wanted someone who had managed to land a wife who was, by all accounts, far out of his league. That's how I found Mark. Mark was average in every sense of the word. Average height, average job, and average skills in the field. But his wife, Elena, she was a masterpiece of nature.
She was tall, statuesque, nearly 6 feet of quiet, introverted beauty that seemed entirely wasted on a man who barely noticed the grace with which she moved. I looked at their photos and saw the hierarchy immediately. She was taller than him. I was taller than her. She was striking. He was plain. I made significantly more money, had better gear, and carried myself with a confidence Mark could only dream of. The hunt was on before I even sent the first message. We met up for a few scouts, and the friendship formed with ease. To Mark, I was the cool guy who had all the best spots and the high-end equipment. I played the part of the mentor perfectly. I became his partner in the field, showing him the ropes, making sure I was the one who always hit the mark while he struggled to keep up. It was an intentional, slow-burn display of dominance. We started a routine of cold, misty mornings spent in the marshes, the sound of our breath hitching in the freezing air being the only thing breaking the silence. Every time we'd finish a session, I'd make sure to drive him back to his house. It gave me the in I needed. I started staying for dinner, sitting at their table, occupying the very air in their home. I'd watch Elena. I'd note the way she looked at my hands, the way she reacted to my stories of success, and the way she seemed to shrink whenever Mark spoke his mundane truths.
She was starving for a different kind of energy, a predator's energy, and I was more than happy to provide it. One afternoon, we were deep in the reeds, waiting for a flight of ducks to come in. The silence was heavy, only broken by the distant, lonely call of a mallard. I decided it was time to stop being subtle. I decided to make the move that would shift the entire game. I started talking about Elena. I didn't hold back, but I kept it sophisticated. I told him how intoxicating I found her, how her height and her poise were all I could think about during the long hours in the blind. Mark tried to laugh it off at first, thinking it was just guy talk, the kind of locker room bravado men use to pass the time. But I didn't join in the laughter. I looked him dead in the eye, the gray light of the marsh reflecting in my shades, and I said, "Mark, I'm serious. If I had a woman like that, I'd never let her out of my sight."
I'd love to see what she's really like when the lights are low and the doors are locked. The air between us turned to ice. Mark was visibly shaken, his hands trembling slightly on his shotgun. He was nervous, uncomfortable, and he didn't have the spine to truly confront me. He eventually managed to mutter, "Well, you can't." But it didn't matter what he said. The seed was planted. I knew Mark's psychology. I knew he couldn't keep a secret like that. I knew he would go home feeling a mixture of fear and a strange, twisted pride and tell her exactly what I had said. I was counting on his insecurity to be my messenger.
The clues appeared almost immediately. A few days later, we returned from a hunt, the sun setting behind the trees. As we pulled into the driveway, Elena was already outside. She wasn't in her usual loungewear or the oversized sweaters she wore to hide herself. She had done her hair, her makeup was flawless, and she was wearing a dress that emphasized every inch of her tall frame. The message was loud and clear. She knew. She asked if I could stay for dinner, her voice carrying a new, rhythmic edge. Mark was a nervous wreck, trying to play it cool while his wife was practically vibrating with a new kind of energy directed entirely at me. That evening at the table, she was flirty and bold. She ignored Mark's attempts at small talk and focused solely on me, her eyes lingering on mine just a second too long. The tension in the room was so thick you could have cut it with a skinning knife. Mark finally realized that by telling her my words, he hadn't protected her. He had accidentally invited the wolf into the heart of the home. He made sure I left quickly after dinner, but the damage was done. The door was already off the hinges. Mark started making excuses not to go hunting. He was working late or not feeling well. He was trying to cut the tie, to retreat into his fortress, but he didn't realize that I didn't need him anymore. I waited until I knew he was at his office, tucked away his cubicle, and then I drove to their house. I walked up to the door, claiming I had forgotten my duck call in his truck and needed the spare key. When Elena opened the door, she didn't look surprised. She looked ready. The polite mask stayed on for only a few minutes as we stood in the kitchen. I didn't waste time with small talk about the weather.
I asked her directly, "So did your husband tell you what I said in the blind?" She played dumb for a moment, a small, knowing smirk playing on her lips, but her eyes were dark with anticipation. I told her exactly what I thought of her, how her beauty was a crime in a house this quiet, and how much I wanted to shatter the boundaries he had placed around her. She pretended to be offended, a half-hearted performance of "how dare you," but she didn't move away. When I told her that I wanted to claim what Mark didn't know how to appreciate, the shocked look on her face melted into something much more primal.
"I can't believe you told him that," she whispered, her breath hitching. I stepped into her space, closing the gap until I could feel the heat radiating off her. "I like what I see," I replied, "and I think you've been waiting for someone to finally say it out loud." I didn't wait for a formal invitation. I went in for the kiss, and the moment our lips met, the dam broke. There was no more pretense, no more hunting buddy, no more rules. It was a frantic, passionate collision of two people who had been circling each other in the dark. I took her there, on the very kitchen table where I had sat for dinner with her husband just nights before. It was a total surrender, raw, intense, and long overdue. She had been starved for that kind of dominance, that kind of unapologetic energy. When it was over, she was breathless, her composure completely shattered, her eyes wide as she looked at the man who had actually followed through on his threats.
"Don't tell him," she managed to say as she adjusted her clothes, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and exhilaration. "I won't," I said, "but we both know this isn't over." She insisted it couldn't happen again, that it was a mistake, a moment of madness, but I knew better. A week later, I showed up unannounced again while the house was empty. She didn't turn me away. We ended up in their bedroom, in the very bed her husband returned to every night. After that second encounter, her entire demeanor changed. The shame was gone, replaced by a desperate, addictive need. She thanked me. She told me she had forgotten what it felt like to be desired with that much intensity. For the next 6 months, I lived a double life. I never spoke to Mark again. He was too ashamed or too intimidated to reach out, probably sensing the ghost of me in his own hallways. But I saw his wife regularly.
I was with her in his house, in his bed, while he was out working to provide for a life that was no longer truly his. Eventually, they moved away, perhaps in a desperate attempt by Mark to save what was left of his marriage. He probably still thinks he won, that he moved her away from a bad influence. He has no idea that he was the one who planted the seed. He has no idea that for 6 months, his wife belonged to the hunter he invited in. And the best part? He'll never know. The hunt is always more satisfying when the prey doesn't even realize the game is already over.